In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. He traveled with 3 ships to what he thought was India. He did this under the protection of Spain to help them expand the spice trade. Instead, Columbus landed in what is the modern day Bahamas. He landed in a continent whose people had very little contact with the outside world since their original settlement in the Ice Age. In his subsequent voyages, Columbus brought with him new domesticated animals, crops, and gunpowder weapons. He even started the European conquest of the Americas. But by far the most influential item Columbus brought with him had to be the European diseases. The native people of America's isolation was also their downfall. They had no resistance to European diseases like smallpox, and they were decimated by these diseases. These diseases caused an extinction level event for the native people of the Americas, with between 80 and 90% of all Native Americans dying to these diseases by 1650, only 150 years after Columbus landed in the Americas. The destruction of the Native American populations due to disease is what allowed the Europeans to expand as much as they did and settle the Americas as extensively as they did. The Spanish used this destruction almost immediately upon their arrival by conquering the Aztecs in Mexico and the Incas of the Andes Mountains in South America. In both these instances, the deaths caused by disease started the collapse of these empires before the Spanish ever arrived. And because of these deaths, the Spanish were able to conquer empires of millions with only a couple hundred men. By the end of the 1500s, the Spanish Empire stretched from Texas in the north to Argentina in the south. Even before European conquest, the natives of North America were quite spread out and had smaller populations than those in Central and South America. With the advent of European diseases, there were extremely few natives left in North America. This made the conquest of the British and French much easier. By 1700, the Americas had almost totally been conquered by the Spanish, Portuguese, British, and French. These empires cared little for native peoples and forced them into slavery in mines and plantations. In more populated regions like Central and South America, many European settlers mixed with the natives, creating the race of mestizo people that many people in Latin America identify with today. In less populated regions, like North America, the white settlers were more easily able to just kick the natives off of their land. Once the United States gained independence, they continued to force their natives further west and force them to either assimilate or force them into poverty on native reservations. In the modern day, native populations have been almost fully replaced by white European settlers, descendants of African slaves, or people mixed between any of these groups. The countries with the highest percentage of native populations remaining are Bolivia and Guatemala, with around 40% of the population being native. The United States, on the other hand, has only around 2% of its population identifying as Native American. In this scenario, I want to explore what would have happened if the Native Americans were resistant to European diseases and their population was not decimated. This, of course, is very unlikely. As for the natives to become resistant to European diseases, there would have had to be a substantial amount of contact between the natives and the Europeans. It's possible that one European ship sailing off the African coast could blow off course and end up in the Americas, but it is unlikely this would spread disease at the same level that the interactions of real life did. More importantly, even if this did spread disease and the natives did become resistant to it would still have caused a significant population collapse. Instead, I want to examine a scenario where by some magic or grand intervention, the Native Americans were just as resistant to European diseases as the Europeans were. Before European colonization, the native population was very large and possibly comparable to that of Europe. We really don't know the actual population of any part of the world from 1500, but especially the population numbers of pre-Columbian America are unknown. All of the population numbers for pre-Columbian America are estimates based off of Spanish accounts, archaeological discoveries, and other data such as carbon footprint data. Before explaining what I think would have happened if the natives didn't collapse, I must pick a population estimate to use. The three estimates I will explain are a low estimate by Alfred Lewis Kroeber, a middle estimate by William Denevan, and a high estimate by Henry F. Dobbins. All of these estimates mention populations in 6 regions: North America, or any land north of the Rio Grande River, the Caribbean, Mexico, Central America, the Andes Mountains, and the rest of the lowlands of South America. For reference, in 1500, the United Kingdom's population was 4.5 million, Spain's was 7 million, France's was 15 million, and all of Europe combined was around 60 million. The low estimate by Kroeber says that there was 900,000 natives in North America, 200,000 in the Caribbean, 3.2 million in Mexico, 100,000 in Central America, 3 million in the Andes, and 1 million in South America. This estimate says the population was 8.4 million in total, and it is often associated with racist ideas that Europeans were supposed to replace the natives. The high estimate by Dobin says there was 12.2 mil in North America, 554,000 in the Caribbean, 37.5 million in Mexico, 13.5 million in Central America, 37.5 million in the Andes, and 11.2 mil in South America. This high estimate says the native population was around 100 million and over 1.5 times the population of Europe at the time. The middle estimate by Denevan, and the estimate I will use for this video, says that North America has had a population of 3.8 million, the Caribbean had 3 million, Mexico had 17.2 million, Central America with 5.6 million, the Andes with 15.7 million, and South America with 8.6 million. This estimate says the native population was 54 million and comparable to Europe in 1500. By 1650, the native population had dropped to between 8 and 9 million, representing an over 80% population decline. Now, I will get into the scenario. When Columbus landed in the Americas, the two main empires were the famous Aztecs in modern-day Mexico and the Incas in the Andes Mountains. Along with these two empires, the Mississippi civilization in North America was not united under one empire, but was also advanced and had large metropolitan cities. Unlike many popular descriptions, most Native Americans did practice agriculture, with only natives living in the low populated regions represented in brown and both pink colors, not practicing agriculture upon European arrival. The Aztec and Inca empires were in many ways some of the most advanced societies on Earth, and were both very populous empires. Without the population collapse from European diseases, it would have been very difficult to conquer these empires, and basically impossible to replace their populations with European settlers. But upon the original interactions between Columbus and the native Taino people of the Caribbean, the Europeans would still have the advantage, with metal weapons, gunpowder weapons, and horses. In the first 40 years of Europeans arriving in the Americas, the Spanish would interact with many nations in and around the Caribbean, likely sending delegates to the Aztec Empire. During this time, the Portuguese would also land on the coast of Brazil and set up trading posts, along with the French interacting with the natives in Newfoundland in modern-day Canada. Eventually, the Spanish would want to expand into Mesoamerica, or the regions around modern-day Mexico, because of the many riches found there. To achieve this goal, they would have to take down the Aztec Empire. Even though the Aztecs were extremely populous and advanced, they were hated by the peoples they conquered because of their practice of human sacrifice. The Spanish would take advantage of this and ally with these natives to help overthrow the Aztec Empire in the mid 1500s. Also, around this time, the Spanish would send delegates to the Inca Empire. During the rest of the 1500s, the Spanish would conquer the Caribbean, as this is the easiest region for them to access and the most important region for agriculture. Along the rest of the Atlantic coast of America, trading posts would be set up by the Spanish and Portuguese. During the 1600s, the powerful European states would start to invest much more into the colonization of the Americas. This allowed them to conquer areas even with higher native populations. The Spanish, especially, focused on American conquest to gain access to the mines of Central America. With the higher native populations, it is much harder to fully conquer, and this causes the Spanish and Portuguese to often set up protectorates or puppet states instead of just conquering. The Portuguese set up colonies on the tip of Brazil while getting special trading privileges with the Tupinamba Kingdom in the south of Brazil. During the 1600s, English and French also get into the colonizing game by starting a war with Spain and annexing Jamaica and Haiti, respectively. Both England and France also set up trading posts along the North American coast, with the French focusing on Newfoundland for fishing. During this time period, the Iroquois Confederation begins to form along Lake Erie and Ontario, and the Cherokee unite in the Appalachians. The Inca Empire also remains strong and participates in extensive trade with the Europeans. The 1700s marked the height of European influence in the Americas in real life, and it marks the height of European influence in the scenario as well. In North America, France expands in the north, and especially along the St. Lawrence Seaway. England sets up full colonies along the North American coast, and both France and England start trading with natives further inland. In the Caribbean, African slaves are brought to work plantations along with the Native Americans by Spain, England, and France. Portugal expands along the coast of Brazil and sets up protectorates in the south and along the Amazon River. Spain continues to expand north and eventually reaches the Rio Grande River with the protectorate of Coahuilteca. The most important event for the Spanish in the 1700s was the Incan Civil War in 1743. The Spanish supported the southern Incas, based out of Cusco, against the North Incas, based out of Guayaquil. From the Civil War, the Spanish took control of the northern Inca Empire and expand trade with the south. Also, in South America, the kingdoms of Mapuche and Guarania expand with the gunpowder weapons they had gained from European trade. In North America, the Choctaw conquer parts of the Cherokee Kingdom and expand into the Mississippi Delta. The Iroquois Confederation continues to get more tribes to join in an effort to avoid English and French influence. In 1759, the powers of Spain, Portugal, England, and France came together in the Paris Agreement and split the Americas into 4 zones of influence. In the zone, the power whose zone it was would be the primary trader and would be the only power allowed to expand in the region. Spain got a zone from the Cascade Mountains in the north, along the entire Pacific coast, and down to the tip of South America. Portugal got the remainder of South America. England got the majority of the North American Atlantic coast and the American Midwest, and France got the North Atlantic coast, along with Quebec. These zones show how confident the Europeans were that they would continue to colonize the Americas, but the next century would show how wrong they were. Now I want to take a little bit to explain the other effects this change in history has on the rest of the world. In the Americas, of course, the demographics are much different. With so many more natives, there is no chance white settlers can replace them, and most don't even try. Only in a few European settlements are white settlers the majority, and very few make it past coastal cities to inland rural areas. Along with fewer white settlers, fewer African slaves are brought over. The reason for African slaves being brought in the first place is that many Europeans died to tropical diseases like malaria and couldn't work plantations effectively. Originally, the Europeans just used natives as slaves, but with the native population being so low, the Europeans started importing slaves from Africa. With so many more natives for the Europeans to enslave, they will bring much less slaves over, with the only area with substantial black population being the Caribbean. On the world stage, European history would be changed a ton. With smaller colonial empires, Spain, England, Portugal, and France would all be less powerful, and this change in power dynamics would alter European history with infinite possibilities. Also, of course, the United States would never exist, and even though many native states become powerful, none would ever have the same global dominance that the US has had at points in history. In this scenario, I don't try too hard to predict the changes in the European and worldwide history, but instead just try to make a fun story. So going forward, the realism of this scenario begins to fade, and it becomes more of a fun take on what I think would happen. In the early 1800s, the Napoleonic Wars turned Europe into a war zone. During the Napoleonic Wars, the Spanish ally with France and are invaded by Britain through Portugal. In the chaos of the Spanish campaign, Napoleon puts his brother on the throne of Spain, and the Spanish grip on the Americas weaken. During this chaos, the Spanish colonies and protectorates gain independence. Eventually, Napoleon stretches his empire too far and is defeated by Britain and much of Europe. After the Napoleonic Wars, the only colonial powers left in the Americas are the UK and Portugal. From the remnants of the Spanish Empire, many new native countries are created, such as the Aztec and Mayan nations. In the north, the Iroquois continue to expand, and in the south, the Inca Empire begins to recover from the earlier civil war. Throughout the rest of the 1800s, the remaining British and Portuguese colonies either declare independence with the help of other native states or are conquered by these native states. Even though their official colonies are abandoned, the British still maintain a tight economic grip on the Americas. To try to avoid this economic pressure, almost all tribes begin to unite into centralized nations. This fills out the map of the Americas for the first time in history. In this new American order, the Iroquois Confederation, Inca Empire, and Tupinamba Republic are the most powerful nations. In 1892, France tries to reestablish itself with its first big war since the Napoleonic Wars. On France's side are the large empires of Austria and Russia. The main goal of the three powers is the destruction of Prussia before they can expand into more of Germany. Britain becomes scared of these three giants controlling Europe and joins the Prussian side to maintain the balance of power. The UK convinces the Ottomans, Italy, and Spain to join them in their war against France, Russia, and Austria. Even with all these countries on Prussia's side, the war still seems unwinnable against the brute strength of France, Austria, and Russia. This all switches when the revolts break out across minority regions in Russia. In this chaos, the UK and Prussia appealed to Russia, and Russia signed a separate peace with them only ceding small territories in Poland and the Caucasus, so they could focus on crushing their own revolts. After Russia's exit, the Prussians, British, and other allies were able to relatively easily defeat the French and Austrians. The French were humiliated and lost significant territories, but Austria fully collapsed as minorities split apart. No Native American nations participated in this war, but the Iroquois, Inca, and Tupinamba benefited from trading with the British and their allies. In 1898, after the war, the Berlin Conference was held where Africa was divided up. After France's loss in the Great War, they were only given token colonies, while the UK, Italy, and Germany divided up the rest of Africa. During the early 1900s, the Industrial Revolution starts spreading to the Americas, with especially the Iroquois and Incas adopting industry and becoming economic giants. Because of this, Britain trades increasingly more with the Americas instead of Europe. This angers one of Britain's greatest allies, Germany, who begins to grow closer to Russia, that feels betrayed by Britain with the annexation of the Caucasus oil fields by the Ottomans. As this alliance grows stronger, Italy and Japan, both with expansionist plans, also grow closer to this alliance. Also, in the early 1900s, France begins to rely on British trade and grows closer to Britain as Germany becomes more hostile. These two alliance blocs go to war when Germany and Italy invade France in 1924 in hopes of a quick war for border territories. Instead, the conflict breaks into what is called the First World War in this scenario, as the war before this was called the Great War. This war pits Italy, Germany, Russia, and Japan against Britain, France, the Ottomans, China, the Iroquois Confederation, and the Inca. This war lasted 6 years until 1930, when Moscow and Tokyo are threatened, and Russia and Japan finally surrender. In the aftermath of this war, the British become global hegemons. They control most of Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, and Australia. Along with these territories, the global economy is effectively run by Britain, with only the combined economic might of the American powers being able to challenge them. All of the nations that lost to Britain lost many territories, and a Polish alliance bloc was set up in Eastern Europe to protect them from Russia and Germany. This quote unquote unity under the British leaves the world in subdued peace for 3 decades. This peace begins to fall apart when the Incan economy becomes the largest in 1956, passing up the British economy. Along with this, the Mesoamerican nations unite into Techia. Britain can see the Americans becoming too powerful, and the Americans want colonialism to end. This tension eventually boils over in 1971 when the Second World War breaks out. This happens when the American nations of Techia, Inca, and Iroquois help support massive revolts on the African continent. This massive war was between the colonial powers of France and Britain, along with Russia, Japan, and Yugoslavia, all of whom wished to expand. Opposing these colonial powers are the nations of Germany, Italy, and China, all of whom opposed the British world order, along with the Polish alliance, the Iroquois, Inca, and Techia, all of whom opposed colonialism. This war lasted 7 years and costed the deaths of more than 100 million, with many dying from nuclear weapons. Finally, in 1978, Britain surrenders unconditionally after all of their allies have been taken care of and they see no hope. After this Second World War, all colonies are abandoned, with even countries who didn't participate in the war being pressured into giving up their colonies. Germany and Italy reestablish themselves, and China comes into its own as its economy begins to boom. In the modern day, the great powers of the world are considered to be Germany, with their European Confederation, China, the Incan Republic, and Techia, while Russia, India, the Iroquois Confederation, the Tupinamba Republic, Mississippi, and Korea are considered regional powers. The Native American population has surpassed 1 billion, and some of the most powerful nations, both politically and economically, are Native American. No one knows the reversal of fates that happened just because of resistance to some diseases. Thanks for watching.